It might be too much for you or to ask you to stand on our side in this battle between civilization and barbarism, but at least have the decency to swallow your selective outrage as Israel wages war against the extremist groups seeking to eradicate the values that we all hold very dear. Mr. President, Israel is on the front line of the war against radical extremism. The battle we fight today is the same battle that you all will fight tomorrow. Hamas, like ISIS and Al-Qaeda, shares a disdain for democracies, a contempt for modernity, and a willingness to target innocent civilians. And yet, some of you have abandoned the only democracy in the Middle East standing against the tide of terrorism. What does this say about your values? What does it mean for the next generation? This institution is being held hostage by some in this assembly who are the worst human rights abusers. The Arab nations, backed by some members of the non-aligned movement, may have the numbers, but they don't have the morals. They use the majority to convene special sessions, issue condemnations, and push through resolutions demonizing Israel. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if the Arab states passed a resolution saying that the terror tunnels were actually simply an irrigation system and that the rockets were nothing more than shooting stars. Mr. President, Israel did everything in its power to avoid this conflict. We accepted every ceasefire, even as the people of Israel came under attack. The world witnessed Hamas's understanding of ceasefires. What were those understandings? Israel seizes and Hamas fires. We were left with no choice. We send our sons and daughters into Gaza for one reason, and one reason only: to restore sustained quiet in Israel and disrupt the Hamas infrastructure that has produced terror and violence for well over a decade. Israel deeply regrets the loss of innocent lives. We are heartbroken, as each and every one in this room, by the stories and images of loss and grief that have emerged from Gaza. To us, the death of any civilian, Israeli or Palestinian, is a tragedy. But Israel faces an enemy that does not abide by any rules or morals. Hamas sees no problem with abusing international humanitarian centers and religious institutions for terrorist purposes. It stores weapons in UN facilities, transports terrorists in ambulances, and fire rockets indiscriminately from mosques, schools, and hospitals deep into the heart of civilian centers. 6 stories below Gaza, 6 stories below Gaza, are miles of dense terror tunnels crisscrossing like a giant web, reinforced with thousands of tons of concrete and supported by massive beams. These terror tunnels extend like tentacles into Israel, ending at the doorsteps of our communities. For years, the international community criticized Israel for restricting the entry of construction material into Gaza. And for years, the international community believed it was sending money to develop Gaza. In truth, like I said, the construction materials and aid dollars were only aiding Hamas to build terrorist strongholds. The fact that Hamas directs its budget underground rather than above ground proves once again that it has no concern for the welfare of the Palestinian people. Let me remind you that Hamas has a seat in the Palestinian Unity Government. This idea is absolutely absurd. It's like inviting ISIS to participate in the Iraqi government, and yet when it comes to Israel, this absurdity is somehow acceptable. Few nations have the courage to admit that Hamas is committing a double war crime, targeting Israeli civilians while hiding behind Palestinian civilians. Fewer still have the courage to admit that Hamas is willing to see its own children killed so it can build sympathy for its cause. By not vocally and unequivocally condemning Hamas, you are condemning another generation of Israelis and Palestinians to further suffering. There's only one way to achieve sustained quiet in Israel and build a peaceful and prosperous Gaza. Hamas must be disarmed, Gaza must be demilitarized, and the international community must divorce itself from the romantic notion of Hamas's freedom fighters. Hamas has been clear about its intentions. It is a genocidal organization committed to the destruction of Israel and the murder of the Jewish people.